All right. I see that a number of participants and attendees are joining, and it is just about noon. So I would like to go ahead and get started to make sure that we have plenty of time for all of those who would like to ask questions and engage to do so. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Amy Krappel, and I am the director of the Center for European Studies. The UF Center for European Studies is a Jean Monnet Center of Excellence and a Title VI National Resource Center for Europe. The center is housed in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, but is multidisciplinary in character, including language and area studies, but also open to participants from colleges across the campus. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's discussion and it will be available on the UFCES website. We will have a question and answer session following the presentation, and participants can submit questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Our discussion today is on Natura 2000, the backbone of nature conservation in the European Union. This talk is presented as part of our lunchtime symposium and is the first of our lunchtime symposium talks for the spring semester. CES generally hosts 3 to 4 lunchtime symposiums, and these are intended for faculty and advanced graduate students to present current research on Europe from any discipline. If you have a European topic that you would like to present, we encourage you to contact Carla Ruffer, rufferc@ufl.edu, but you probably have received an email from her already if you're here. And in addition to the lunchtime symposiums, the center offers many funding opportunities for faculty and graduate students, including travel grants, working conference group grants, course development and enhancement grants, and many of these deadlines are upcoming in March and April. So if you are interested, again, we would encourage you to visit the website, ces.ufl.edu. Our speaker today is Matthias Prummer. Matthias graduated as a biologist, ecologist at Debrecen University in Hungary in 1999. He then completed his master's degree in environmental policy and management at the University of Amsterdam and has had the opportunity to work on various nature conservation programs in Hungary and abroad. He's worked on conservation policy issues and various field projects in Europe, Asia, and Africa for organizations such as the World Wildlife Fund, Eurosite, BirdLife, and the Herman Otto Institute. Mr. Prummer has also contributed to the implementation of LIFE projects, LIFE, which are conservation and environmental projects financially supported by the European Commission's Environmental Fund. And he has focused in particular, as we'll hear today, on the conservation of the Natura 2000 sites and species. Matthias is a member of the Technical Advisory Group and Sacred Falcon Conservation Task Force of the Convention on Migratory Species, a member of the editorial board of Haliaca, the Journal of Birdlife, Hungary's Raptor Conservation Working Group, and a national volunteer coordinator for peregrine falcon conservation. Mr. Prummer is now a first-year PhD student at the School of Natural Resources and Environment at UF. In addition to Matthias Prummer, we are happy to have with us today, moderating today's Q&A session, Dr. Madan Oli. Dr. Oli is a professor of population ecology in the Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation at UF. His research program looks to improve understanding of the dynamics, regulation, and persistence of biological populations and to contribute to the science-based management of wildlife populations in human-dominated landscapes. And with that, I want to hand it straight over to Matthias for his presentation. Matthias, can I hand it over to you?
I don't have much time, and of course, it is a topic we could talk, I don't know, for days. And now I really would like to go to the point and go into the Natura 2000 network itself. However, to start and to make you understand better the whole concept, I need to give some background information on Europe and European conservation issues in general. And I think it's necessary. This is what I'm going to speak now. Bullet points shows you the main topics I would like to cover in the next about a little bit more than half an hour. Okay, as you can see, if you look at this map, which is not a usual map, but reflecting the real sizes of continents, you can see that Europe is tiny compared to the other continents. Just to give you a rough idea, I put some numbers in the table, and you can compare the entire European Union without the United Kingdom now, as for the size, population, and population density. And this is the starting point to understand what is the status of nature and what are the challenges for nature conservation in Europe. And even more to this tidiness, Europe is kind of split into many countries with their own cultures and policies. So it makes even more complex this whole conservation challenge. I'll come back to this later. Okay, as you know, when I'm talking about Europe now, I mean European Union, which is not the entire Europe. In fact, almost half of Europe does not belong to the European Union. However, this Natura 2000 concept is developed and maintained by the European Union, and I'm going to focus on that. As you know, the United Kingdom just left the European Union, so we have one less country. And in addition, we have some candidate countries in the Balkan region that could be part of the European Union, hopefully in the coming years. If you look at the physical map of Europe, you can see that Europe has a lot of different type of habitats and places, from high mountains to lowlands and seasides to inland dunes. And also on this map, you can see that there are a huge area in the east, which is mostly a lowland, belongs to Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, which are not part of the European Union, but still hold unique habitats that you can find in traces also within the European Union. You will see it later. I'll show you on another map. So it means that we are talking about Europe's natural heritage. We're talking about a vast diversity of habitats and species. From Mediterranean to Arctic climate, you can see a variety of climate belts. And according to that, or defined by that, there are really a number of habitats we need to conserve here in Europe. You can see the very vague map of the climate zones you can find in Europe, and also makes the picture very complex. In general, if you go from north to south, the biodiversity increases. And it's the same if you're going from west to east, but it's partly because of the cultural impacts too. You can see here the biogeographical regions of Europe, and it is important because that defines the conservation policy of the European Union. As you can see, some of the regions are shared by many countries, while some of the biogeographic regions shared only a few countries, obviously giving more responsibility of those countries. So a very, very important thing I need to mention regarding Europe's nature, and it's kind of obvious, that the presence of human and human civilization had deep impact on the nature. You cannot really compare it to the US because we have a lot more people in a less area, a lot less area in Europe, and you can find a very, very tiny areas in Europe that are untouched or pristine. If you're talking about Hungary, my home country, there's only 2% of the country which is intact, never touched by people. And those are mostly the alkali lowland areas. It's not good for agriculture. And those are the rocky steep slopes, also good for nothing from human point of view. And and basically that's it. All the other areas are used for agriculture, for building settlements, developing infrastructures, and even if we are talking about forests, which you might think it's a natural area, it is not. All around Europe, forests are managed intensively. So you cannot really call them a natural system, or at least some tiny bits that you can call really natural, but most of it just managed by forestry. So it's pretty much influenced by human presence. Another very important feature, most of the steps that we are missing large herbivores, wild populations I'm talking about, because they were gone as soon as humans entered, or a little bit later, but anyhow, they just disappeared. For a long time, domesticated animals, large herbivores like cows, cattle, horses, could replace wild populations, but in modern times, we need less and less livestock of large herbivores. So those areas managed by grazing is decreasing. And it is important because many areas or many sites interesting for conservation point of view are secondary habitats, man-made habitats, and maintained by man. Still, they are very important for conservation point of view, but as the old land use patterns are just changing, we are losing those habitats that were created hundreds or thousands of years ago by grazing, haymaking, and just logging the forest on some parts of the mountains where we have haymaking meadows now. So these are the kind of the background we should start when we are talking about policy. You can see here the land use types in Europe, in the European Union, and although you can see a lot of green, most of the areas are not like natural green, but managed forest or managed grasslands you can find, and the yellowish areas are pure agriculture areas. Even though or also agricultural areas can be valuable for nature conservation point of view, because life kind of insists the places, so species would like to live and try to live in a human altered landscape as well. So some of these species could adopt, some less so, but it means that still many species you can find in agricultural areas. And for those, in the EU, they created this high nature value farmlands that can contribute to an achievement of conservation aims of the European Union. Another background issue would like to clear before going to the Natura 2000 sites is the legislative background that created the Natura 2000 network as such. The first and very kind of obvious and important question is the question of national versus European Union's legislation. When the European Union was formed and all the predecessors, most of the countries already had conservation policies and conservation legislation in place. So those legislation needed to be harmonized. So the basic idea was to kind of bring the conservation legislation on the same level in the European Union and harmonize species and habitat conservation. It is important because different species and habitats are important on national levels and on European levels. In the United States or in Russia or any large countries, it is kind of easier to follow a uniform approach of conservation. But just to give a very short example on that, for example, in Hungary, we don't have high mountains, but we have some mountains. It means that the climax vegetation is forest everywhere in the hills and mountains, because the mountains are not high enough to have like alpine meadows or rocks above the vegetation level. It means that species originally living in alpine zone and can be found in Hungary are unique in the country, so they are protected. Um, they occur in Hungary because back in time, 300-400 years ago, settlers logged the forest in the mountains, and because of the climate and because of the logging and maintaining haymaking, uh, um, those alpine zone species, plant species, could sneak in and survive in that environment. But it needs an active management, and without active management, the forest is closing, and we are losing those species. And they could survive for hundreds of years because people needed hay for livestock, but not anymore. So the conservation has a dilemma to save the natural process, which is closing the forest, but losing those alpine zone species, or saving those species by actively managing those haymaking meadows, but it means that it's not economical at all. And on the other hand, those species can be found in the alpine zone, and they are not uncommon. So you can see that political borders can influence conservation dilemmas and conservation policies. And if you have a small country, then sooner or later you will face that dilemma. And somehow European Union wanted to solve those dilemmas as well, and kind of making the conservation more efficient, I mean, in financial way. So the first step on European level to bring the policies on a common level was the bird directive, the birds directive. It was approved in 1979 and amended in 2009, and it deals almost, not almost, but entirely only with bird species. So that was the start. It was, the time in '79, the first green movements started already in the Western world, and it was, I mean, decision makers just felt that it is time to step and do something. And birds were attractive. Many studies that time already showed the decrease of some populations. So this is how the whole directive come to life. The most important, maybe the most important parts of the directive are the annexes, and you can see here what the annexes are covering. I put special protection areas in bold because this part of the legislation is a keystone or building stone for Natura 2000. Along with the next directive, I will talk in just in a minute. So you can see that those 5 annexes covering declining species, threatened species, game species. It covers habitats of those species, and all kind of management issues as well. And then as the time proceeded, it would become necessary to create another directive about basically everything else but birds. So the Habitats Directive covers habitats of European Union, natural habitats, and also all the other species but birds that lives in the member states. And also Annex 2 is the other building stone for Natura 2000 because it creates sites or requires member states to designate sites of those species of community interest and not only species but also habitats. And yeah, the way to get here was not really easy and still not easy because each time a candidate country joined the European Union, that country brought its species along. And it was a long negotiations, what species could be included in the annexes and what not. And the reason for that is because some accessing countries brought in some species that could be kind of not really or needed no protection in member states already. And if those species would be in the annexes, that all the other member states should put in a higher level in their own country, because it should be on the same level. And the other way around. For example, hamster, European hamster is declining and or just gone extinct in many Western European countries. But even up to the mid 2000, it was a pest in Hungary, and in some areas it still can make damages to crop in Hungary. So it was a debate on that, whether or not it should be included in the annexes, and if so, then how. So it's always a game. And another problem is everyone knows that the list of species and the habitats, but most of the species should be rediscussed, because populations are not the same. I mean, population sizes are not the same during those years, and some species should be on the list. They are not now, and the other way around. But the problem is, if they open the legislation, the directive for discussion, then they have to open the whole legislation. And it means that there are some interest against the whole conservation areas, but after the last 4 years in the US, I shouldn't talk more about this one. So they don't really want to open. So the only way at the moment now to have accessing countries and bringing in species. But yeah, sooner or later, probably something will happen, because it is really something we need to change. So again, Birds and Habitats directives created the legislative background for Natura 2000. And if we step further, then we get to the implementation of Natura 2000. So put it really, really simple and a basic way, Natura 2000 network consists of special protection areas from Birds Directive and sites of conservation interest from Habitats Directive. You can see the numbers here as for the network. And the major idea is to create a network of conservation sites in the European Union that provides safe haven for species and habitats, and possibly they are connected as much as possible. There's another legislation, I don't put it here, green infrastructure that kind of connects those areas, but that's a different story. All EU countries were required to designate those areas. The designation process was not the same in all the countries. Ideally, all interested parties should have been involved and discussed what sites should be included in Natura 2000 and what not. But in some countries, or most of the countries, government basically just gave a list of designated sites, and the European Commission decided if they accept those lists or not. It was not the Commission only who had an impact in that, but also NGOs create shadow list, like so-called shadow list of proposed sites. And the Commission also had a look at that list and made suggestions to the national governments what sites should be included on the list. So that's the story of the designation of the areas. Very important that Natura 2000 sites are not always legally protected in member states. It means that well, most of the governments put the sites on the list that were already protected. National parks, regional parks, state parks, whatever they had. But there were areas, private land or even state land, that were not under protection, but the Commission proposed to put it there. And they are Natura 2000 sites now, which means that they are protected in a way by the European legislation, but they are not protected legally, if you like. But in a way, they are still protected because Natura 2000 means that you can carry out all kind of activities on Natura 2000 sites, but all those activities should consider the natural values there and should not make temporary damage to the habitats or the species living on those sites. You should also know that national legislation can be always stronger than EU legislation, and it's not only in conservation field, but also in general. But they cannot be weaker than the EU legislation. So once a site is a Natura 2000 site, the government should make sure, even though it's a private land, the government should make sure that that site is I wouldn't say untouched, but remains in a good conservation status. And if not, then the Commission will ask awkward questions and can oblige the government to restore the original status. I put a source here and on other slides too, so if you're interested, you can find more information there. You can see on the map how Natura 2000 sites are covering the European Union. It looks good, but in practice, it works a little bit less good. And in candidate countries, you can, well, it's already some of the, those countries are not candidate, like Croatia. You can see in orange those sites that, that are designated or proposed for later becoming Natura 2000 sites. Yeah, just to make you understand, candidate countries need to bring up their legislation or harmonize their legislation with the European Union legislation, and conservation policy and conservation legislation is part of that process. And that is why they need to designate areas that later become Natura 2000 sites, but just to distinguish, they call it emerald sites and not Natura 2000 sites at that moment. It's an older map, that's why Croatia is still orange, but they are EU member now. Okay, some nice numbers. This is from the latest report of the countries. Every 6 years, member states should make a report to the European Commission the status of species and habitats. And the Commission creates a barometer report, a summary of the status of nature in the European Union. As for the latest records, you can see in the countries with the most and the least Natura 2000 sites, but basically they are all the same ones designated, and the change is well, not that fast, because it's pretty difficult to put another list on another site on the list, Natura 2000 list, mostly because of governments and avoiding conflicts with the owners. And there is not much example to take sites down of the list. In principle, it is possible if the habitats and species disappeared from the site. But yeah, we and the governments would like to keep it, those sites on the list. Okay, this is a nice tool I would like to show to you. And okay, I have to speed up a bit. Here we can see the map of all the Natura 2000 sites in the European Union. And what you can do, you can set the layers, what you would like to see, SPAs or SCIs, or what you can do is, just an example, you can do for a site. Let's see my home Natura 2000 site. You can zoom in. You see, here is Budapest, and this is the hills, Pilis Hills and Visegrad Hills. You can see different colors, SPAs and SCIs. Sometimes they are overlapping, as you can see. And if you click on the area, and this is an SPI from Birds Directives, you can see the basic data, and all the sites have the so-called standard data form. If you click on it, then you will see a lot of things about the given area. So first, the basic identification codes that you can see, the names, the year of designation, the area, and more importantly, you can see here the species that you can find in the area on which the designation was based. If you click any of these species, let's see this one, you will see the species itself and the quick summary and status in the European Union. And yeah, if you scroll down, you can see conservation measures taken in that site, the status, if there are data, you see a map. You will find all the observation points and all the areas, Natura 2000 sites where the species occurs, at least according to the standard data form. And you can make multiple selections. So it's a nice tool. You can get out a lot of data, you can export, and the European Environmental Agency maintains these sites. So it's quite up to date, and you can make a good analysis of whatever you want on nature conservation in the European Union. Okay, going back to the presentation. Okay, Article 17 of the Habitats Directive requires member states to report every 6 years the conservation status of habitats. As I said, you can find resources for the Euro or Natura 2000 barometer of the European Union, and also explaining the reports. And you can find the reports as well. So all the official reports on nature conservation can be found on European Commission's website. Basically, everything is transparent. You can find all the information on nature conservation you want. And well, that the governments uploaded or sent to the Commission. Another important task of the governments or the managing bodies of the sites, that can be also private land, to prepare and update management plans, Natura 2000 site management plans. It still continues and still ongoing, and many sites does not have such plan yet, but they're working on it. It's not only in Hungary, but all around Europe. And if anything happens to a Natura 2000 sites, or if there is any development, governmental or industrial or whatever, then the government should report it to the European Commission, saying that here is a Natura 2000 site, and some habitats on the sites will be affected on this and this proportion, and the European Commission will review that report and makes a recommendation. I put it in quotation mark because it's not really a recommendation, but it's a yes or no. Usually no. The Commission does not like at all if anything happens to Natura 2000 sites. In some cases, they allow to happen something, but then compensatory measures should be taken, and the same type of habitats, the same amount, the same proportion should be rebuilt or designated in another area. So altogether, the area of the given habitat should not decrease in the European Union or in the given country. If so, or if there is some disagreement or the government does not fulfill that requirements, then the European Commission can and actually does go to court, to the European Court, and if the government does not act, then could be some measures against the government from the European Court. Most of the cases, it means big money, so government doesn't like that solution. Another it's a final but very, very important part is who is financing Natura 2000. It's actually the obligation of the governments to maintain Natura 2000, but European Commission set aside a good amount of money to support that activity, and it's not. You can distinguish direct and indirect funding of the maintenance of Natura 2000 network. You can see here the estimates for the costs and benefits, and it is very important to see that benefits are way more of Natura 2000 network than the cost. It's about, I just calculated the cost of maintaining Natura 2000 network. It's 5.8 billion euro per year. It's about roughly 7 billion US dollars per year. But the benefits are not greater. In order to the government get prepared to the future and how they will finance Natura 2000, before each financial cycle of the European Union, they should prepare so-called prioritized action framework, in which they define conservation priorities and also the plans how to finance activities to improve or maintain good conservation status of the habitats and species in the given country. LIFE is the major fund, EU fund for conserving the Natura 2000 habitats and species, but there are some other funds you can get some money for such activities. I listed there. Finally, some words about that instrument. This is a project-based fund, which means that you have to apply with your organization to get the grant. The average grant is about 1 million euro, and the average run of a project is 4 or 5 years. And you can ask money for species conservation or habitat conservation. And the last round, there were 3.4 billion euro in LIFE budget, and that was increased for the upcoming financial cycle, or we call it in the European Union the multi-annual financial framework. So that's the EU budget in the given period. How it works, you apply for the LIFE program, and if you work with the priority species or habitats, then the European Union covers 75% of the cost, and you have to put 25% to it, which is usually the government's adding that money. If it's not a priority species or habitats, simply just listed in the directives, then it's 60%, the intensity of EU co-financing. Apart from LIFE program, EU put or set the aim to put a lot more money into conserving biodiversity, and Life Fund is just one element of it. But in the end, it comes together from different funding that 10% of the EU budget should go for biodiversity conservation in 26 and 27. You can find more information on the LIFE projects. You can also surf existing or already closed LIFE projects on the link you can see here. And from the last financial period, you can also see a map and simply just click on the countries and the project on the last link. So basically, if we summarize, then Natura 2000 is a major conservation tool for the European Union to harmonize member states' conservation efforts. And it's the largest conservation network in the world. And it provides also measurable financial benefits for society apart from conservation benefits. And European Union takes it seriously and tries to put a lot of money behind it. So that's what I wanted to tell you about Natura 2000, and I think I'm just about time. So if you have any question, then I think Dr. Oli will moderate that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. We have one question. What is the connection between the European Green Deal and Natura 2000?
Well, the Green Deal is covering not only Natura 2000, but the Green Deal is a little bit, it's not conservation focused as such. Green Deal is basically bringing green policies into or green aspect to every policy, and it's quite complex issue, so it belongs to a lot of policies, but basically it's Green Deal is trying to make the European Union more sustainable, more climate friendly, and that also includes more conservation part, but it's a lot broader context than Natura 2000.
So can I ask you a follow-up question about that? Is that a EU level policy, or is that mandated or required of individual countries on a voluntary basis?
No, the European Union works a little bit different way. So there are a lot of negotiations. It's not among the member states, but also between the European Parliament, the European Council, and the European Commission. So you need to know the structure of the European Union, because European Parliament, it's kind of representative of European citizens, like direct representatives of European citizens. So people voting for them, just like any member of the Parliament getting in. European Commission is kind of the European government, if you like. And European Council is basically a council of governments of the individual member states. And all those three entities should agree on any kind of policies. But once the agreement is reached, then it is obligatory to all member states.
Okay, thank you. So the second question that we have is just slightly rephrasing it. So is there any political opposition of Natura 2000? And if there is, then what form does it take? That is the political opposition to Natura 2000.
Political, opposition, okay. Well, not at that state. So political opposition, I wouldn't say so. If we are talking about designating new sites, that could be a problem, depending on the site. And I wouldn't say political, it's more like economical opposition could be in some areas that has some economic interest, then you know it's not very good if there is designated Natura 2000 sites, because you know then you cannot develop. I can tell you an example from Hungary, and of course, just to add, if you're talking about political opposition, then it's always kind of linked to political opposition as well. In some years ago, the car factory Audi extended their area into a Natura 2000 site, and the Hungarian government needed to ask permission from the European Commission for that. And yeah, in that case, obviously, the factory and therefore politicians, and they just really didn't like Natura 2000 as such, because the Commission was very tough and made a lot of criteria in order to give permission, and also told to the Hungarian government that that was the last time they permitted any kind of you know, alteration of Natura 2000 sites.
All right, thank you. So the next question is, although the Natura 2000 system is quite extensive, is there much push for corridor to connect those spaces within countries or across national borders? And how does land tenure and land ownership affect the chances of developing wildlife corridors between Natura sites?
Thank you. That's a good one, a good question, and a tough one. Yeah, there are, you know, green infrastructure is kind of exactly about connecting those habitats. The second part of the questions is, yeah, that's the tough one, because not everyone is happy. I mean, landowners are not always happy on contributing to Natura 2000. And no, I'm just thinking, because the best example are the farmers. Farmers, in many cases, managing Natura 2000 land, whether they're own land or they just renting land from the state, but they're managing it. But if it's a Natura 2000 land, then they have some obligations to follow. So they cannot really make it industrial. For exchange, they can get some compensation through the Common Agricultural Policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually we have another question that is directly related to that. I'll just read you the question, and so maybe it will help you clarify the previous question also. Are there any specific examples that you can give where Common Agricultural Policy and Natura 2000 overlap? And Common Agricultural Policy has the requirement of biodiversity and conservation. So can you give some specific examples where the two can overlap?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about for hours, and you should. I don't know if the person put the question how, or anyone, how much they know about the Common Agricultural Policy, but the finance behind, and there are different pillars, different pockets of the budget of the Common Agricultural Policy. And one budget is specifically is for supporting green farming and nature or biodiversity friendly farming. So this is one thing where Natura 2000 and CAP is overlapping, because farmers can ask like compensation for less income due to non-industrialized farming. So this is one thing. A similar thing occurs in the fishery policy, also part of CAP, and yeah, but there's a big debate, because although farmers can get some compensation for some you know, requirements or from conditions how to manage their lands, they are not really the greenest in most cases. And there are studies, they're so-called deep green or dark green compensation, and those are working, but then farmers are really restricted what they can do and what not. But the light green compensation is not really working according to studies.
Okay, so the next question is related to your background map in Zoom. So is that related to Natura 2000 sites?
Not Natura 2000 sites, but Natura 2000 species.
Species. Maybe can you elaborate a little bit? Yeah.
Satellite tracking data from sacred falcons.
Sacred falcons. Okay. So I think, Amy, when do we stop? So that was the last question that I could see.
I think that's fine. There's only a few minutes left. So if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank both of you for participating. And again, remind everyone that this talk is recorded and will be available on our website, and any supplemental information that Matthias wants to provide, maybe links to some of the sites that he showed, we can post alongside that to facilitate use of those. And again, just asking everyone to please fill out the survey on your way out and look for future lunchtime symposium and other talks. And please consider giving one of your own.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Carola and Matthias. It was a
Okay,
very
thank you very
informative.
much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.